The hallway of Eastbrook High School was quiet as Amelia Walker walked toward her next class. The usual chatter and clatter of lockers being slammed shut seemed distant, as though muffled by something she couldn't quite place. Amelia was used to the sounds of the school, having spent the past 2 years wandering its hallways, but today felt different. It was as though the very air around her had shifted. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. Amelia pushed open the door to the art room, her mind still lingering on the strange sensation. The room smelled faintly of oil paint and turpentine, the familiar scent of creativity. She dropped her backpack on a chair and made her way to the large canvas hanging on the far wall. It was a painting of an old house, its windows dark and foreboding, the overgrown garden surrounding it giving off an eerie vibe. But it was the eyes that drew her in. For some reason those eyes, painted in meticulous detail, seemed different. They were fixed on her, their gaze unsettlingly intense. They were watching her. Amelia blinked and rubbed her eyes. "Get a grip," she muttered under her breath. "It's just a painting." But something didn't sit right with her. The eyes in the painting felt almost alive. It was as if they were aware of her presence, studying her every move. "Amelia," a voice called from behind her, snapping her out of her trance. She turned to see Ms. Richardson, the art teacher, smiling warmly at her. "How are you today?" "Oh, I'm fine," Amelia stammered, feeling foolish for zoning out like that. She quickly turned away from the painting and walked to the back of the room, trying to shake the strange feeling from her mind. As the day went on, Amelia couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. They haunted her, lingering in her thoughts like a shadow she couldn't escape. The more she thought about it, the more the unease settled into her chest. It was just a painting, right? Just a work of art created by someone who had a knack for capturing emotion. But the eyes were different. They were too real. The next day, when Amelia arrived at school, the sensation of being watched had only intensified. It felt like the very walls of Eastbrook High were closing in on her. She hurried to her first class, trying to ignore the prickling feeling at the back of her neck. As she walked past the hallway leading to the art room, something caught her eye. One of the other paintings hanging on the wall, a portrait of a girl standing in a field, had the same unsettling eyes. They were staring directly at her, just like the ones in the painting from the day before. Amelia froze, her heart skipping a beat. She glanced around, half expecting someone to be standing nearby, watching her, but the hallway was empty. Her pulse quickened as she backed away slowly, but not before catching a glimpse of another painting. A large, abstract piece, where once again the eyes were there. They were everywhere. She couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was wrong. That afternoon, as Amelia sat in the cafeteria, she tried to focus on her lunch, but the whispering voices around her only heightened her anxiety. She had tried to talk to her best friend, Sarah, about the strange occurrences, but Sarah had brushed it off as stress. "You're just imagining things, Amelia. Maybe it's because you're so focused on school. You're probably just tired." But Amelia knew it wasn't just stress. The paintings, the eyes, they were real, and they were following her. As she looked around the cafeteria, she noticed something even more unsettling. A few of her classmates were missing. Jessica, a quiet girl who usually sat in the corner of the room with her friends, was gone. So was James, a guy who sat across from Amelia in history class. The seats they usually occupied were empty, but no one seemed to notice. No one mentioned it. Amelia's breath caught in her throat as she turned her attention back to the table in front of her. Sarah was still chatting away, oblivious to the changes around her. Amelia's gaze drifted back to the walls of the cafeteria. There, above the door, hung another painting, a painting she had never seen before. It was of a forest at night, the trees twisted and dark, with two eyes peering out from between the branches. The eyes looked familiar. Too familiar. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't look away. The eyes were staring directly at her, cold and unwavering. The painting seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, and Amelia felt her stomach drop. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Do you see that painting?" Sarah paused mid-sentence, glancing at the painting above the door. "What? The one with the trees? Yeah, it's kind of creepy, but so what?" Amelia swallowed hard. "No, I mean, those eyes. They look like the ones from the art room. The ones in the paintings I saw." Sarah furrowed her brow, looking skeptical. "Amelia, you're freaking yourself out. Maybe you should take a break. This whole school thing is starting to get to you." But Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. As the day went on, more and more students seemed to vanish. It was as though they had simply disappeared into thin air, leaving no trace behind. The once bustling halls of Eastbrook High felt eerily empty, and Amelia could no longer ignore the growing sense of dread in her chest. That night as she lay in bed, Amelia couldn't sleep. Her mind raced, the images of the paintings and those eyes swirling in her thoughts. She tried to tell herself it was all in her head, that it was just a figment of her imagination, but deep down she knew it wasn't. Something was happening, something she couldn't explain. And it was only getting worse. The next day the halls of Eastbrook High felt even quieter. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as she walked toward the art room, the weight of her fear making each step heavier. The eyes were waiting for her. She could feel it. As she opened the door to the art room, she was greeted by an unsettling silence. The paintings on the walls seemed to have changed. They were no longer just still images of far-off places, they were alive. The eyes in the paintings were watching her, following her every movement. And then, for the first time, Amelia realized something that chilled her to the bone. The eyes weren't just in the paintings. They were inside her head. Amelia couldn't breathe. Her chest was tight, her heart racing with panic as she stood frozen in the middle of the art room. The once familiar space, filled with creativity and color, now felt suffocating. The eyes, those damned eyes, were everywhere. They stared from every corner, every canvas, following her every movement. They weren't just in the paintings anymore, they were in her mind. They were in her thoughts. Amelia tried to shake herself free from the grip of fear, taking a slow, deliberate breath. "It's just my imagination," she whispered to herself, though the words offered no comfort. Her fingers curled into tight fists, her nails biting into her palms. She had to make sense of this. She couldn't let herself fall into madness. But no matter how much she tried to rationalize it, she couldn't ignore the growing terror. The paintings, the eyes, the missing students. It was all connected, she was sure of it. Something darker was happening in Eastbrook High, something that had its claws deep inside the school, inside her. She turned away from the paintings, her mind racing. What if she was losing her mind? What if these were just vivid hallucinations brought on by stress, or worse, something more sinister? She had to talk to someone. Anyone. Sarah, her best friend, had dismissed her fears the day before. But maybe Sarah would listen now. Maybe Sarah would finally believe her. Amelia didn't waste time. She grabbed her phone from her bag and texted Sarah, "Can we meet after school? There's something I need to tell you." She paced the art room, trying to focus, trying to calm the storm of thoughts that seemed to swirl faster and faster in her mind. She had to get a grip. This wasn't just about the paintings. This wasn't just about her fear. People were disappearing. Disappearing. The word sent a shiver down her spine. Amelia hadn't realized until now that she hadn't seen Jessica or James in a while. She hadn't seen a lot of people. The school felt like a ghost town. Her phone buzzed and Sarah's response popped up. "Of course. What's going on?" Amelia's fingers trembled as she typed. "I don't know yet. But something's wrong with the paintings. It's like they're alive. And people are missing." A long pause followed. Amelia stared at her screen, her pulse racing as she awaited Sarah's response. She could feel the weight of the silence hanging between them, stretching into eternity. "I'll be there," Sarah texted back. Amelia sighed in relief, though the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. When the final bell rang, Amelia rushed out of the building, her mind clouded with dread. She found Sarah waiting for her by the main entrance. The air was cool, a hint of dusk starting to settle over the school. The sky was tinged with shades of purple and orange, but Amelia barely noticed. The weight of the mystery pressing down on her was all-consuming. Sarah raised an eyebrow as Amelia approached. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Amelia gave her a tight smile. "I wish it was just that." They walked together to the nearby park, a quiet place away from the watchful eyes of the school. Amelia was grateful for the silence, for the calmness of the trees and the rustling leaves. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed, that those eyes were still watching her from somewhere beyond the real world. Once they found a secluded bench, Amelia took a deep breath and began explaining everything. She told Sarah about the paintings, about how the eyes seemed to follow her. She told her about the missing students, about how no one seemed to care, how it felt like no one noticed the strange things happening around them. Sarah listened intently, her expression serious. "I don't know what to think, Amelia. This sounds like some creepy story. Are you sure you're not just overthinking things? You've been stressed lately with all the schoolwork and—" "No," Amelia interrupted, her voice sharp with frustration. "I've been fine. I know what I'm seeing. The eyes, Sarah, they're not just in the paintings. They're in my head. And I'm not the only one who's noticed things are off. People are disappearing. And no one's talking about it." Sarah's face softened, her skepticism fading. "Okay, But if people are missing, shouldn't we tell someone? Like the police? Or... No, Amelia cut her off, shaking her head. I don't know what's happening, but the school, it's not normal. Something's wrong here. The paintings, there's something about them. They're connected. They're somehow controlling things. She paused, her hands trembling as she spoke. I need to figure out what's going on before it gets worse. Sarah's eyes widened in realization. You think the paintings are causing people to disappear? Amelia nodded. I think they're connected somehow. But how, I don't know. A cold breeze swept through the park, causing Amelia to shiver. The sound of leaves rustling in the wind only added to the sense of unease that had settled deep in her bones. For the next few days, Amelia couldn't focus on anything but the paintings. Everywhere she went, she saw eyes staring at her, on walls, in books, in the hallways, even in the eyes of her teachers. It felt like the world itself was closing in on her. And with each passing day, another student disappeared. It was as if they'd never existed at all. Amelia became obsessed. She spent hours in the art room, staring at the paintings, trying to figure out the connection. The eyes, they had to mean something. But what? One evening, as she was inspecting the same old house painting from days ago, she noticed something she hadn't before. A small, almost imperceptible detail, etched into the corner of the canvas, was a symbol. It was faint, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Amelia leaned in closer, her breath catching in her throat as she traced the shape with her eyes. The symbol was a circle with an eye in the center. And around it, the faint outline of strange words, written in an old language she didn't recognize. Her heart skipped a beat. Could this be a clue? A clue to understanding what was happening? The following day, Amelia sought out Mr. Parker, the art teacher. He was always a little odd, but something about him made her trust him more than anyone else at the school. She found him in his office, sipping coffee, his glasses perched on the edge of his nose. Mr. Parker, she began, her voice shaky, I need to ask you something. About the paintings. He looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. What about them? Amelia swallowed, feeling the weight of the question settle in her chest. Are they cursed? Are they tied to the disappearances? I've noticed something strange in one of them. A symbol. And the eyes, they feel like they're alive. For a moment, Mr. Parker didn't say anything. He simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly he leaned forward, his voice low. You've seen it, haven't you? Amelia's heart skipped a beat. What? Seen what? Mr. Parker stood and walked over to one of the paintings, a grim look on his face. The eyes, he said softly. They've been watching us for years. And if you see them, if you're paying attention to them, then they've chosen you. Chosen you to be part of something much darker than you can imagine. Amelia's blood ran cold. What do you mean? What's happening here? Mr. Parker met her gaze, his eyes filled with a deep sorrow. The paintings, they weren't just made for art. They were made to trap souls. Those eyes are the eyes of something ancient. Something that has been waiting for the right person to notice them. You've unlocked it, Amelia. And now you must stop it or it will consume this school, and you. Amelia's mind raced as the weight of his words crashed down on her. There was no going back now. The answers she sought were just beginning to reveal themselves, but they came with a terrifying cost. Amelia's mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and disbelief. Mr. Parker's words echoed in her head as she sat in the dimly lit art room, staring at the paintings on the walls. The quiet hum of the school after hours did nothing to comfort her. If anything, it made everything feel more eerie, as though the walls themselves were closing in. Consume this school, and you. The chilling echo of Mr. Parker's voice haunted her, gnawing at her from the inside out. Amelia didn't know what to believe anymore. She had spent so much time trying to rationalize the strange events, trying to make sense of the paintings, the eyes, and the missing students. But now, with Mr. Parker's cryptic warning, she realized that what was happening was far beyond anything she could have imagined. She looked at the paintings again, each one now seeming to pulsate with a strange, otherworldly energy. They were more than just art. They were something else. The eyes, the symbols, the faces, each one a part of a larger, more terrifying puzzle. What had Mr. Parker meant by chosen you? And what was this ancient force that had been waiting for someone to unlock it? Focus, Amelia whispered to herself. She couldn't let herself spiral into panic. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. If she was going to stop whatever was happening, she needed to understand the paintings, understand the force behind them. But where to start? The symbol she had seen on the painting of the old house, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The circle with the eye in the center, surrounded by strange markings, she had to know what it meant. Amelia's fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone and quickly began searching for anything that might help her understand. She typed in ancient symbols with I, and hit search. As the results loaded, her mind raced. Could this be some sort of occult symbol? A warning? A curse? One result caught her attention, an article about an old cult, dating back centuries, that had used symbols like the one Amelia had seen in the paintings. The cult was rumored to worship an entity known only as the Watcher, an ancient being who could see everything. It was said that the Watcher's eyes were the windows to its power, and those who gazed into them would become its pawns, trapped in a world between the living and the dead. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Was this what was happening? Had the Watcher somehow found its way into the paintings? And if so, how had it crossed over into her reality? She quickly read more, her pulse quickening as she learned about the cult's rituals. They had believed that by creating art, by trapping souls within it, they could control those souls and bind them to their will. The cult had disappeared centuries ago, but the article suggested that the power of the Watcher had never truly left. The paintings, like the ones at Eastbrook High, were a gateway, a portal to a dark dimension. Amelia sat back in her chair, the weight of the revelation sinking in. The paintings, the eyes, the missing students, they were all part of a trap. The Watcher had been waiting for someone to uncover its secret, to release it. And now that someone was her. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. "Where are you? We need to talk about this." Amelia's fingers hesitated over the screen for a moment. She needed Sarah's help, she couldn't do this alone. But at the same time, she knew that getting too close to the truth meant putting Sarah in danger. The Watcher was already watching her, and it could just as easily turn its gaze toward anyone around her. She didn't have time to hesitate. There was too much at stake. By the time Sarah arrived at the art room, the sky had darkened, and the moonlight filtered through the windows, casting eerie shadows across the room. Amelia was still sitting in front of the painting of the old house, her eyes locked on the unsettling gaze of the figure in the portrait. Sarah stepped inside, looking around nervously. "Amelia, you're freaking me out. What's going on?" Amelia didn't respond right away. She had so many questions, so many pieces of the puzzle she couldn't quite put together. But she couldn't ignore the urgency in Sarah's voice. She had to explain, she had to bring Sarah into this no matter the cost. "Sarah," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "this is going to sound insane, but I think I know what's happening here. I've been looking into it. The paintings, they're connected to something ancient. There's a cult, and this being called the Watcher, that has been using art to trap souls." Sarah frowned, her expression one of disbelief. "A cult? Amelia, this isn't some horror movie. You're scaring me." "I'm not making this up," Amelia insisted, standing up and walking over to the painting of the old house. "Look at the eyes. The eyes are the key. They watch you, Sarah. They make you feel like you're not alone even when you are. And the more you look, the more they pull you in. I think it's trying to take over the school." Sarah was silent for a moment, processing the information. "So what, you think the paintings are cursed? That the people who are disappearing are trapped inside them?" Amelia nodded grimly. "That's what I think. I think the Watcher uses the paintings as a way to draw people in, to make them part of its world. The students who've disappeared, they've become part of the paintings. Their souls are trapped just like the ones before them." Sarah looked at the painting of the old house, her face pale. "But how do we stop it? If it's been here for centuries, how are we supposed to fight something like that?" Amelia swallowed hard. She didn't have all the answers, but she couldn't let the Watcher win. She couldn't let her friends and everyone else fall victim to this evil. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I think the answer is in the symbol. The circle, the eye, it's a key. I think if we can figure out what it means, we can find a way to close the portal, to trap the Watcher back in the paintings." Sarah's eyes widened with realization. "Wait, what if the symbol is in other paintings too? Like if it's part of some bigger puzzle?" Amelia's heart skipped a beat. "That's it. If the symbol is in more paintings, then maybe it's a map. Maybe each painting holds a piece of the puzzle." The two girls exchanged a look, the weight of the task ahead of them heavy in the air. Amelia felt a sense of resolve settle into her chest. She couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close. The next few days were a blur of frantic searching. Amelia and Sarah combed through every painting in the school, studying each one for symbols, for hidden meanings, for any clue that might help them understand the ritual behind the Watcher's power. Each time they found another symbol, another piece of the puzzle, the weight of their mission grew heavier. But with each discovery came more questions, and with each passing day, the presence of the Watcher seemed to grow stronger. Amelia could feel its eyes on her at all times, the pressure building as the school became more and more like a haunted house. It was as though the walls themselves were closing in, the paintings watching, waiting for something. And then, one afternoon, Amelia found something she had been searching for, a hidden message behind one of the older portraits in the library. It was barely visible, scratched into the wood of the frame, but it was there. It was a series of words in a language she didn't understand, but the more she looked at them, the more she realized that it was the key. With Sarah's help, they researched the language, piecing together the words. They discovered that it was an ancient script used by the cult. The message was a warning. To release the Watcher, one must become the Watcher. Amelia's blood ran cold. The Watcher wasn't just trying to trap souls. It was trying to consume them. It was trying to become one with the living world, and the paintings were its doorway. And Amelia, she was the key. The weight of the message sat heavily in Amelia's chest, as though an invisible hand had wrapped itself around her heart, squeezing tighter with each passing second. To release the Watcher, one must become the Watcher. Her mind was racing, panic and confusion flooding her thoughts. What did it mean? Had she already unlocked something she couldn't reverse? Could she already be too far gone? She glanced at Sarah, who was standing next to her, her face pale and strained, as though the weight of the revelation was sinking in too. They had found something crucial, something that might lead them to the key to stop this nightmare. But at what cost? Amelia, Sarah's voice was low, trembling, what does that mean? Does it mean you could become the Watcher? Amelia shook her head violently as if trying to shake the thought out of her mind. No, it can't. I can't let it happen. The walls of the library seemed to close in around them. The air felt thicker, heavier, as though something were watching them even now. The paintings, the eyes, they were out there and they were listening, waiting for them to make the wrong move. The Watcher, that ancient, malevolent force, was so close. And with every symbol they uncovered, the danger grew more real. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the rising tide of panic. We have to figure out what this ritual is. What the Watcher wants. If it's trying to turn me into it, we need to stop it before that happens. Sarah was silent for a moment, processing what Amelia had just said. But how? Every time we try to understand more about it, the danger grows. The more we dig, the more we're trapped. Amelia clenched her fists, her heart racing. She couldn't afford to stop now. She was already in too deep. The Watcher had already set its sights on her, but if there was a way to close the portal, if there was a way to stop this before it consumed more lives, she had to find it. The next morning, Amelia and Sarah met in secret, their usual spots in the school now feeling like territory that belonged to something else. The school had started to change in subtle but disturbing ways. More students had disappeared overnight. Teachers had become strangely distant, their gazes unnerving as if they weren't quite human anymore. Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that the paintings were no longer just contained to the art room. It was as if the entire school had become a canvas for the Watcher, the eyes now inescapable. It wasn't just the paintings anymore. It was the air, the very fabric of the school itself. The Watcher had seeped into the walls, into the cracks, and into the hearts of everyone around her. The school was becoming part of the trap. They met in the library once again, surrounded by rows of books that were supposed to offer knowledge, but instead felt like a tomb of forgotten truths. Amelia had brought a notebook, filled with notes she'd gathered from her frantic search of occult texts and the old paintings. She had come to a horrifying realization. I think I know what the ritual is, she said, her voice shaking with dread. Sarah looked at her, her face pale. What? You mean, you know how to stop it? Amelia paused, her mind replaying everything she had learned over the past few days. The cult, the paintings, the symbols, the warnings. The more she pieced it together, the more she understood that this wasn't just a battle to save herself. This was a battle to save everything. The Watcher isn't just a being, Amelia said quietly, her voice low, almost like a whisper. It's a force, an entity that feeds on souls. It doesn't just want to trap them, it wants to consume them. And the ritual, it's about replacing one soul with another. To become the Watcher, you have to give up everything. Your humanity, your identity, and you take its place. Sarah gasped. Wait, so you're saying that if we don't stop this, you could become the Watcher? Amelia nodded, feeling the weight of the words like a crushing burden. That's what I think. If the ritual goes through, it could replace me. Could take over. And I would become part of the paintings, trapped in the same endless cycle. Trapped in its eyes. Her heart pounded as she realized the full horror of the situation. She wasn't just trying to stop a ghost or an ancient spirit. The Watcher was no mere entity. It was a parasite, a being that fed off souls, that used its victims as vessels to continue its existence. And now it had chosen her as its next vessel. "You can't let that happen," Sarah said, her voice urgent. "I know," Amelia whispered. "But I need to figure out how to stop it. The ritual has already begun and I'm the key." The two girls spent the next several hours in the library, going through every book they could find, searching for something, anything, that could give them a way to undo the ritual. But the deeper they dug, the more they realized how little they truly understood. The Watcher's power was vast, ancient, and unrelenting. Everything they found only led them in circles, with no clear solution in sight. As the sun began to set, the sense of urgency began to grow. Amelia could feel the weight of the paintings pressing in on her, could feel the eyes following her every movement, every thought. It was as if the walls of the school itself were closing in, and she was running out of time. Then, just as they were about to give up, Amelia came across something that made her freeze. It was a reference to a ritual that could reverse the Watcher's power, but it was incomplete. The ritual, it said, required a sacrifice. "A sacrifice?" Sarah repeated, her eyes widening with horror. "What kind of sacrifice?" Amelia scanned the page, her breath catching in her throat. "It says that to close the portal, to stop the Watcher from crossing over completely, a life must be given. A life must be taken to sever the connection." Sarah's face went pale. "So, you're saying we need to kill someone to stop it?" "No," Amelia whispered, shaking her head. "It's not about killing. It's about stopping the Watcher from taking someone else's life. The ritual can't be completed if the sacrifice isn't willing. If I can perform the ritual on my own, I can sever the bond." "Amelia," Sarah said, her voice pleading, "please, we can't do this. We need to find another way." "You can't." But Amelia didn't let her finish. She couldn't. "I have to do this. I have no choice." That night, as Amelia stood alone in the art room, surrounded by the paintings that had haunted her for so long, she knew what she had to do. The Watcher had been waiting for her, and she had unwittingly opened the door. She had to close it. She had to sever the connection before it consumed everything she loved. The air felt heavy as she stood in front of the painting of the old house, the eyes still watching her. The time had come. She closed her eyes, gathering the strength she had left. The ritual was clear now more than ever. She could feel the presence of the Watcher all around her, closing in, waiting for her to make a mistake. She had to act fast. But before she could begin, she heard a voice behind her. "Amelia." She spun around, her heart skipping a beat. There, standing in the doorway, was Mr. Parker. His face was shadowed, his eyes dark. "You've done well," he said, his voice a low whisper. "But you still don't understand. The Watcher will never let you go. It's already taken you." Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "I'm not giving in. I'm going to stop it." He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You've already begun the transformation. It's too late for you." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "No. I won't let it happen." Mr. Parker smiled darkly. "It's not up to you anymore." And then, with a cold smile, he stepped forward and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Amelia alone with the paintings, alone with the Watcher. And as the eyes stared back at her, she realized the truth. She was no longer just fighting to stop the Watcher. She was fighting to keep herself from becoming it. Amelia's heart raced, her chest tight as though something was trying to crush the very air from her lungs. The dark, oppressive presence in the room had shifted, something malevolent and ancient swirling just out of sight. She could feel it. The Watcher was closer than ever before, its invisible grip tightening on her. Her hand trembled as she stood frozen in front of the paintings, the eyes in each frame staring at her, unblinking. The eerie silence in the art room seemed to stretch on forever. She felt the weight of its gaze, the pressure mounting until she thought she might break under it. It wasn't just the paintings now. It was everywhere, inside her mind, twisting every thought, every breath. She was being consumed from the inside out, a slow, painful unraveling of everything that made her human. The ritual Mr. Parker had spoken of had already begun, and she was its unwitting vessel. "Amelia." The voice again, low and distorted, almost a whisper but still clear, cutting through the thick silence. It wasn't Mr. Parker this time. It was something worse. The Watcher. She spun around, her eyes frantically scanning the room, but there was no one there. The air felt thick and oppressive, like it was pressing in on her from every angle. The paintings on the walls seemed to pulse with life, their eyes now more intense, more focused. "Amelia, you are mine," the voice crooned, a soft hiss in her ear. Her breath caught, her fingers clutching the edges of the wooden frame of the painting she was standing in front of. The air in the room shifted, and for a brief moment she thought she saw a figure move just at the edge of her vision. But when she turned, there was nothing there. Now she thought, "This is my mind playing tricks on me. I can't let it take me." But the longer she stood there, the more the painting seemed to come alive. The watcher's presence, its unseen gaze, wrapped around her like chains. She could hear its whispers, feel its cold breath on her neck. The watcher was everywhere, and it knew her fears, her insecurities, her doubts. It had already planted itself deep inside her mind, and it was feeding on her fear. The realization hit her hard. The watcher wasn't just trying to possess her. It had already started. Every piece of knowledge she had gathered, every step she'd taken toward understanding the ritual, had led her to this moment. She was already entangled in its web. The moment she started looking for answers, she had begun opening the door, and now it was pushing through. No, she couldn't give in. She wouldn't give in. Amelia forced herself to take a deep breath. She couldn't let the fear take over. She had to be strong. She had to stop the ritual, even if it meant losing everything. Amelia's mind was whirling, her thoughts fragmented and spiraling as she reached for the book she had been reading in the library. She needed to finish the ritual. She needed to sever the connection before it consumed her. But there was something else that tugged at her, an unbearable thought, a question she hadn't allowed herself to consider until now. What if stopping the watcher meant losing herself completely? She glanced at the painting of the old house. The eyes in the image seemed to watch her more intently than ever before. The darkness had already begun to seep into her. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, a cold, gnawing presence that threatened to take over her entire being. There was no time left. The watcher's power was growing with every passing moment. It wanted her, needed her. And if she didn't finish what she had started, the consequences would be disastrous. She opened the book and flipped to the page describing the final steps of the ritual. The words seemed to blur in front of her eyes, as though the letters themselves were shifting, trying to escape her grasp. "A soul must be given," she read aloud, her voice shaky. "To break the watcher's hold, the soul must be willingly offered. The one who opens the gate must become the key to closing it. If the key is taken by force, the watcher will rise unchallenged." Her fingers trembled as she read those final lines. A soul must be given. There it was again. The sacrifice. The words rang through her mind like a bell, echoing in her ears. "Amelia," a voice whispered from the shadows. "You know what must be done." Her heart skipped a beat and she froze. It wasn't the watcher's voice anymore, nor Mr. Parker's distorted whisper. This voice was different, familiar. It was Sarah. Amelia turned quickly, her eyes wide with fear, her pulse quickening. Sarah was standing at the doorway of the art room, her face pale, her eyes wide with concern. "What are you doing?" Sarah's voice was tight with fear. Amelia didn't know how to answer. She couldn't explain it, not now. The truth was too dangerous. It was too late to go back. The watcher was already inside her. She could feel it, its presence crawling through her veins, its cold breath against her neck. "I have to finish it," Amelia whispered, her voice cracking. "I can't stop it. I can't let it consume us. I have to do this." Sarah's eyes widened, her face crumpling in disbelief. "Amelia, no. You don't understand. If you finish this, if you go through with the ritual, you'll—" "I have to," Amelia interrupted, her voice rising, desperation creeping in. "I have no choice, Sarah. Don't you see? The watcher has already started. It wants me. If I don't close the door now, it will take us all." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Amelia, please. There has to be another way. There has to be." But Amelia shook her head. She didn't have the answers. She didn't know if there was another way. She only knew that this ritual, this sacrifice, was the only way to stop the watcher from consuming everything. "I'm sorry," Amelia whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Before Sarah could say anything else, Amelia turned back to the painting. Her heart pounded in her chest as she held the book in her hands, staring at the incantation that could end it all. She could feel the darkness pushing at the edges of her mind, the watcher's presence looming larger and more oppressive by the second. "I have to do this," she repeated to herself. With a trembling hand, Amelia began to recite the incantation. Her voice trembled, but the words came out anyway, as if they were flowing through her from somewhere deep within. The watcher's presence seemed to grow stronger, its oppressive weight pushing in around her, but she couldn't stop now. She had to finish it. As she spoke the last words of the ritual, a strange sensation washed over her, an intense cold that seemed to seep into her bones as if the very air had frozen. Her vision blurred as if something was trying to pull her into the painting, her body trembling violently. "Amelia," Sarah's voice cracked through the air, and it broke through the haze of darkness that surrounded her. Don't. But it was too late. A sharp, bone-chilling wind tore through the art room, and the paintings seemed to ripple, their eyes flashing with a malevolent gleam. The room spun around Amelia, her mind slipping away. She could feel herself being pulled, her body becoming weightless. The Watcher's grip tightened around her soul. For a brief moment, Amelia felt herself slip into darkness. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The wind, the darkness, the weight, they were gone. Amelia stood in the center of the art room, the cold stillness around her. She could barely breathe, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. It was over. But then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. The Watcher. It was here. And Amelia realized with growing horror that she wasn't alone anymore. The figure emerged slowly, as if peeling itself out of the shadows. It didn't walk, it glided, a shifting mass of darkness vaguely shaped like a human, but its form was unstable, bending the air around it like heat off pavement. Its face was a swirling void except for one constant feature, its eyes. Dozens of them hovering in and out of its shape, blinking in silent rhythm. And all of them, fixed on Amelia. She wanted to scream, to run, to collapse, but she stood still. Not by choice. She was paralyzed. Not by magic but by truth. Because in that final moment, as the Watcher loomed before her, Amelia understood. The Watcher wasn't just a creature, a ghost, or a curse. It was an idea, a curse of observation, of judgment. It was born from guilt, from secrets, from the dark things people hide away. The paintings didn't trap people because of magic, they trapped them because they saw what no one else could, the rot beneath the surface. And now it saw her. Sarah ran toward Amelia, pushing through the invisible resistance in the air. She reached her just as the Watcher's form towered over her friend. Let her go. Sarah shouted, standing between Amelia and the monster. Her hands trembled, but her voice was fierce. To her surprise, the Watcher paused. It turned its many eyes toward Sarah, examining her. Time stretched. Then it spoke. But not in words, in feeling. One must remain. One must carry the gaze. One must know and not look away. The weight of those thoughts hit both girls at once. The Watcher didn't just possess people. It burdened them. Someone had to carry the knowledge. The pain. The truth of what had been seen. Amelia finally found her voice. I'll do it. I opened the gate. I finished this. No, Sarah whispered, her eyes filling with tears. There has to be another way. You don't have to give yourself to it. Amelia looked at her quietly. It's not about giving. It's about accepting. We can't fight it by hiding. We fight it by facing it. She turned back to the Watcher. I see you. And with those words, everything shattered into light. When Amelia woke up, she was lying in the middle of the school art room. The air was still. The paintings were normal. Just oil and canvas. Sarah was at her side, her face etched with exhaustion and relief. It's over? Amelia whispered. Sarah nodded slowly. I think so. The ritual hadn't destroyed the Watcher. It had contained it again. Bound it to what it always was, a warning, a memory, a burden shared. And Amelia had taken the weight upon herself. From that day forward she could still feel it. Not the monster, but the knowing. She could sense when someone was hiding something dark. She noticed the lies in people's eyes. She had become, in a way, a watcher, not of souls but of truth. She used it not with fear but with purpose. To protect. To see. To never look away again. The school eventually returned to normal. The disappearances were quietly forgotten. Mr. Parker was never seen again. Some said he took a leave of absence. Others believed he had retired. Only Amelia and Sarah knew the truth. And they never spoke of it again. Epilogue. Years later, Amelia became a therapist. Sarah became an art historian. They stayed close, connected not just by friendship, but by the shadow of something larger than themselves. Amelia never painted again. But sometimes, when she passed an old, abandoned gallery, she would feel the faintest whisper in the back of her mind. A reminder that some eyes still see, and some truths are never forgotten. This story, though written with the utmost care, is purely fictional.